Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another special episode of the X Button. I'm one of your hosts, Alejandro, and with me is the Acer.
Paul, hey everybody, how's it going? How
So,
dare you disrespect me like this?
come on, you know that's always gonna happen.
Oh, always.
always, always, always.
We need to make a supercut of every single weird nickname you've given me off the top of your head.
So, there's been the Gardener, there's been Porkins, there's been this one.
There's been you have literally come up with a different one each and every episode.
It always depends on whatever I've recently seen to kind of to keep kind of a theme going. So in this case, the theme is the fact that for the first time, finally, we're doing a laser focused episode on one game because you and I recently beat God of War Ragnarok. I beat it 2 days ago. You beat it yesterday.
Just last night, baby.
Yeah, and we're like, because you're going on vacation pretty soon. I was like, let's just do evergreen episodes so that those can go live as you're on vacation. We already recorded one. That now that we're recording this one, I know that one's actually gonna go live next week, and now this one's actually gonna go out. No, sorry, that one's going out this week. This one's gonna go the next week. So
okay,
because of the anniversary week for the Assassin's Creed thing, better to launch it in that same week.
Point.
So
all right.
So yeah, Paul. So God of War Ragnarok. Before we start talking about it, there's a reminder that this is the X Bottom Podcast, our gaming podcast that posts every Thursdays from 2 p.m. onwards, God willing. Available here in the YouTube channel Escape Gaming, as well as most audio services around the world, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the like. You can find the links and the RSS feed at anchor.fm/escape-gaming. If you enjoy our show, give us a like and subscribe. Usually this is where we would be talking about what have we been playing, and then it's followed by the news. So basically this is going to be like a very extended what have we been playing. So
I wanted to start by mentioning how much of a similarity I realized that me and my wife bear to Thor and Sif.
Yes. Oh my god, yes.
It is, besides the red hair,
and
maybe he's a bit heavier than me. But that's the exact look for both of us, really.
Yeah, because Sif is like a shorter blonde, like a more put together. You're like a more bigger giant that's disheveled.
Yep. I am huge, deep booming voice, and I loved every time Atreus would have to ask for help, and Thor was just like, and
nope.
Easily breaks down whatever wall that was in front of him. But yeah, so of course everybody, spoilers for God of War Ragnarok. We're just gonna go jumping right in. So if you haven't played it, I would not recommend listening in on this. Play it, beat it, and then come back, unless you just like to hear our voice.
Exactly, yeah. And before we start like fully diving into full spoilers, as you basically just sort of said something, we can give like top level thoughts, and then we can have like a clear cut. Okay, now it's full on spoiler. So Paul, what do you think overall of God of War Ragnarok? We played like a couple hours last week because that's when it had just come out, and then we basically devoured within that week. Top level.
So top level, it's fantastic. I adored this follow-up to 2018. Everything that they set up was paid off in some way, shape, or form. Every little seed that they dropped grew and became this massive tree. I was just awestruck at the scale that it really built into, but then never losing that opportunity and ability to go really focused in on two characters just sitting there acting. And man, was it some powerful emotions, some great big spectacle, solid combat, and my goodness, what a time we had. And I have to admit, if it wins everything at the Game Awards, I would not be surprised. It cleans house from everything outside of Elden Ring, and even then it beats Elden Ring in many areas. It's just, oh, what a time that was. And I want to revisit it one day. I hope they put in like a New Game Plus and I could just sit through it at a slower pace.
I assume they're gonna do that because that's how they did it. That's how they did it with the 2018 one. They launched the game, and a few months later they announced and then launched the New Game Plus that came up with like new armor, the leveled up enemies. So I give you kind of like a little harder but more complex experience by doing it in New Game Plus, but a reason to go back to that one. So I am shocked at how much, because I have mentioned this before in the show, and for people that may jump in for this one, God of War 2018 is my second favorite game of all time, like none, like bar none. That is a game that I have said it before, and I'll say it again. That's a game that rescued me from like falling off from gaming at a time where my life was like being hardships were just hitting me left and right. The games that I was playing were like going deeper into the kind of games I just didn't want to be playing. Like that was the advent of live services becoming more of a focus. Everything was just a perpetual open world. The death of the more authored single player experience was just basically being diminished. It was around that time where EA had that whole single player is dead. Remember that?
I remember it very well.
Yeah,
and
so
I'm very glad that we've come full circle from that.
Oh, you absolutely come full circle for that. So that game hitting when it hit me, and like in everything in context with my life, and hitting as well as it did with a story that I never expected to be as good as it was, coming from God of War, the series that in entries before in the Greek mythology was about a one-note brute that was just destroying everything in his path. That it was all about chaos and vengeance, and seeing them being able to not completely wipe the slate clean, but build up from those beginnings and show that even as someone that is so far gone can find a way into redemption that started there, and it was a seed that sprouted here. It's like I am shocked how much God of War Ragnarok is an improvement in many areas over the 2018 game. Just like how improved the combat is, how much more emotions it wrung out of me over a story that already had hit emotional highs in the first one, and on top of that being so expansive to the point that I just kept being shocked at how much bigger it kept being, while not being like a completed bloated mess that many open worlds can happen, like recent Assassin's Creed games, for example. But it never loses sight of hitting you with the intimacy even when it goes so big. But then when it goes so big, it reminds you like God of War used to be the series where you go for a spectacle that only a sister studio, Naughty Dog, could eventually like meet and surpass with the Uncharted series. But this is, I feel that God of War Ragnarok is retaking that mantle of like, we are Sony Santa Monica being this studio you go for if what you want is like incredibly beautiful, incredibly exciting, incredibly tight playing, and incredibly awe-inspiring spectacle, like especially with everything that you see middle game forward, and especially with the very end, that when I beat the game, I told you I was speechless. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I was like, wow, I had the chills down my spine through that entire final section. I will definitely gonna talk about what that was, like in spoilers, and it stuck the landing. I feel like the last time I saw a narrative third-person action game stick the landing so hard is Uncharted 4. A game that I have told you many times that that's a game that is carried for me by the story, and the gameplay is like, just whatever. And this is God of War to me has always been the complete package.
Have your cake and eat it too kind of a game. Yeah,
and very subversive game, but not in the bad way, because we know that's subverting expectations with... Well, the whole idea of subverting expectations always kind of comes with like a negative connotation, thanks to what happened with Star Wars The Last Jedi, Game of Thrones Season 8, even The Last of Us Part 2. I would say this also subverts expectations, but not in a way that gives a middle finger to the audience or is just subverting expectations for expectation's sake. It does them in a way that completely reshapes what you think about God of War and gives you a story that, as it looms in cataclysm and loss and despair, it leads you into a story of forgiveness, redemption, and growth. And those were things that were toyed in the 2018 game, and they came full circle here in a way that both games complement each other so well. That makes me so excited to eventually play them both back to back and seeing that full story, like from beginning to end again.
Absolutely. One thing that you mentioned that I really liked is the concept of subverting expectations is mentioned because prophecy is a huge part of the game, and therefore the subverting of expectations is not just what the writers are setting up and then the audience is expecting certain things, but rather the prophecy that is literally told to you at even the end of 2018's God of War, and kind of beat over the head constantly over and over again to different characters to show the idea of, are you a slave to fate, or are you going to make it your own? By not like saying up yours fate, but rather writing your own story in a sense. Because as well as, I mean, they even say it, Kratos says it in one of his little mini stories of trying to subvert your own prophecy can sometimes create it itself. But rather than trying to directly go against it, just doing your own thing leads to a completely different outcome than what is essentially set up. And I feel like that was a very resonant storyline to tell, especially to kind of remind people constantly, even up to the very last few minutes of the game, what they want you to know out of this, which is to not close your heart off to all the evil in the world, feel it and be better. And that is like, what a hopeful and wholesome response and answer out of God of War.
No, I kept telling you in our private chats, is like, this game is the complete antithesis of The Last of Us Part 2.
Completely.
Like they're completely opposites. Like one kind of like just dwells in the messiness of humanity, and the nastiness that sometimes love can take you in, and leaves you in a spot that leaves you reeling, and it's very impactful in a way that some people like and some people don't. But having God of War give you this great message, like this great hopeful message, at a time where sometimes we can be overly cynical about things. That's what makes the ultimate message of this one land even more.
I think what helps me even visualize it even further is, imagine, if you will, a world where 2018's God of War happened, and then in the first 10 minutes Thor just murders Kratos, and then the whole rest of the game is you as Atreus trying to go for revenge. And it's like that,
it could have easily been that.
You easily see it so perfectly. And of course, going along the railroad that Last of Us 2 already created, and you can see how just changing that kind of direction to tell the same thing a different way, at least for me personally, does a lot more with my own emotions in a cathartic, painful, but healing overall way that I feel like they wanted to do. And I don't know if they succeeded, but this isn't about Last of Us 2. I know. Still get sometimes.
Yeah, but you just think about it this way: like the very beginning of this game, with before I mentioned it in spoilers, starts with such a heart-wrenching moment that you don't expect, and it takes that moment and gives you innumerable happiness much later on. That brings in such catharsis that man, it makes you wish life could be that cathartic sometimes.
Oh yeah.
In the eve of insurmountable loss, and it had that intent throughout the whole thing, and man, I can't wait to talk into more details. So overall, you absolutely love this game, right?
Adored it. I fully understand why people have given it a 10, and I think I absolutely would, just for the story alone, the gameplay alone earns it such high praise. But beyond that, it's like full marks.
Yeah, and with me, it's like my mind says this is a 9.5 because there are a few things that are worth critiquing about it. Like pacing wise, I didn't mind the pacing. I thought the pacing kept throughout for me, but I know some specific points that I can imagine on replay are gonna be very tedious.
Yeah.
And maybe some people feel the tedium immediately if they're not as enthralled with it like we were. So it's something kind of to note about. And this is something that was happening a little bit with the 2018 game, and this is amplified a little bit here, that when you play this game outside just mainlining the story and you're doing the side quests and trying to get all the collectibles and all of that, there's just something about the UI of the map and the way the compass sometimes works, and you can sometimes mark
I gotta say, I
places.
do not like that compass.
Yeah, it's it's very thick, and it's right, left. It starts flickering a lot that it makes you feel like it's broken sometimes.
Yeah. And
that is just something that you can run up a wall if you're trying to get the platinum trophy like I am. I'm 43 hours in, and I'm definitely gonna 100% just like I did the 2018 one. So it's not it has its imperfections that I think are worth mentioning, but my heart says a 10. It's just because
I think
it turns out to me like what's so good about this game was also so good in 2018, but it's done better. And the level of emotion it left me with is like, it just transcends the issues for me. It may not transcend it for others, but for me. And in as the background of how much that original game meant for me, like this one landed even better for me, like overall. That I also see where the 10s come from. Like I absolutely do.
It's that whole philosophy where we've talked about recently, where it's like 10 doesn't mean perfect.
Yeah.
But it's a masterpiece.
It's a masterpiece, an essential game that anyone needs to experience for themselves.
Yes, especially if you ever really want to get into a game series, like play 2018's God of War, play this one, and it's like I feel like the love that you will have for gaming as a medium will carry you through any other game you ever try to play.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that's about all I can say without spoiling.
Yes.
It's just, if you haven't, go play it. It's amazing. Play the 2018 one. It's also amazing. If you've ever had any issues, it's like, this is where I turn into Billy Mays, where I'm trying to talk somebody into it like a telecommercial, where it's like, have you had great expectations you feel like you can't live up to? Difficult relationship with your father? Crazy situations in your life? This game is for you. Yeah, it's, jokes aside, it's amazing, and I definitely want to keep playing it whenever I finally finish my palate cleanser, going through a little bit of Modern Warfare or something else, and then go back to it to keep playing more of the side missions. Because man, my heart couldn't take it, and there's so much to do. But
absolutely. Yeah. So right now, that was basically our spoiler-free section of this discussion. So from here on out, full on spoilers. So if you want to come back, definitely come back. But this is where we now go into the nitty-gritty about like everything for this game.
Press X for some spoilers.
Absolutely. Kratos didn't die.
What a freaking turn of events that was.
Yeah, I tell you, up until when Ragnarok starts, that entire moment, I was having the chills on my spine because the level of spectacle, I was like, this is incredible. How it just kept escalating and escalating. The portals being destroyed, Jormungandr appearing out of nowhere and seeing it in the background, the different armies like flying left and right.
Oh, the flying overhead, the crazy dragon wyvern things, the like running through trenches as every like NPC and enemy type fight each other in the background, wolves tearing dudes apart. I was like, this is freaking nuts. It's like it hurts my soul to say it, but like it calls me back to earlier on when I finally finished Horizon Forbidden West. And then I was like, oh man, this blows that out of the water because they really went for it, but they just didn't have the power behind it, and this goes the full distance. Oh, because God of War tells a better story than Horizon. Oh, so like full stop. Like Horizon has cool lore, it has cool character moments, but I don't feel you have the emotional connection this game earns from like its few characters. And I'd say it also does archery way better than Horizon 2. Yeah, we can say that. I know it's kind of an apples and oranges, and I shouldn't say it like that. But the gameplay in this game is just exceptional. That's what it is. The fact that they managed to make Atreus's moveset as a now playable character. The big surprise of this game, which just to kind of give context, like they let reviewers preview the first 5 hours of the game, and they made them stop right at the end of Svartalfheim. So that's when they cut the previews, and that's when many people were like, this is more God of War. It seems like improved God of War. It doesn't seem like that makes a lot of sense. Big leap of a sequel, and then immediately that's when you're hit with a playable Atreus, which again, similar to many sequels, from going to Metal Gear Solid 2, Halo 2, The Last of Us Part 2. They give you the bait and switch and have you play with a different character. Which I will say, like, I was shocked how much I enjoyed playing as Atreus with his kid, as he kept getting more and more, because at the beginning it was pretty simple, but the game has been diligent at opening up his skill set more and more. If you explore his sections, you find chests that give you even more abilities and makes the combat a little bit more fast-paced.
Like the way you can chain combos with his bow.
I was crushing some enemies after a while. I had this set of 3 relics that gave me different abilities for sonic arrows.
Mm-hmm.
So by the end, I was like hitting one arrow, 3 dudes would get sonicked, and then I'd hit one of them, and just like everything would explode. And so I love that they not only continued that with all of the amazing builds you could do for Kratos, but actually putting that into Atreus and having it so perfectly transition between the other character Freya, which was also a newcomer to being.
Yeah, that shocked me too. Because I wasn't expecting that you will have Freya as your companion for the majority of the game too.
I thought you'd have to she'd be hounding you and hunting you the whole game or something like that. I did not expect the growth from both of those characters talking about forgiveness and
because it's a major theme of this game.
Valid emotions from both of them, like having solid conversations of back and forth to where each of them couldn't continue the conversation because it's like, well, you have a point, but F you. And then 10 minutes later, we'd kind of have a little bit of a back and forth. And then same thing again. And it's like each of them had various, very good reasons for what happened. And in the end, the fact that they grew past it and then had this really cool, not awkward guy and girl friendship that I super was into by the end of it. I was like, let's go.
Yeah. It's almost shocking that this game forgoes true romance. If you know what I mean, even though it's sometimes like winks and nods, especially with Atreus. You get the dialogue moments of Atreus asking Mimir, "How do you know if you like?" So do you get that dialogue of that of him asking Mimir I
don't think I got that one honestly.
Okay,
but
so
I knew he was super into Angrboda. And there was a line from Mimir about Sigrun that I don't know if you got that, where he was talking about the stuff that Sigrun was, and she's brave, true, smart, tall. I was like, oh shoot, Mimir, all right, buddy. But gosh, it's just the amount of emotion and character that was pulled out of every interaction between these people, and because it was such a revolving door cast that where you could have been trapped as Atreus for way longer, and I'm so glad they were willing to all right, we're done with Atreus, get back to Kratos, get comfortable, enjoy the stuff that you've been really building up.
Yeah, you're not stuck with a secondary character for 10 hours at a time.
Yes, and I'm really glad for that, because I think Atreus would have grated on me in just the gameplay department, because while it was cool, it's it's not the frozen axe and the chaos blades
or the spear.
Or now the spear.
Yeah, the other secret thing. Yeah.
But yes,
when that spear happened, I was like, oh my god, Paul is gonna lose his mind, because I know how you like the whole shield and spear idea, me telling you that God of War Ghost of Sparta, the second PSP
has
game,
has
a spear and shield.
None of the others do.
And that there was no modern way for you to play that game. So I was like, oh man, especially when I did the whole God of War series replay earlier this year. And me just screenshotting my TV and saying, just man, you would have absolutely loved this one. Too bad that there's no way to natively play it on PS5 or even PS4. You need a PS3 for that. So when they gave you that, and with its full suite of upgrades also.
Oh yeah, I was so happy. Because at first it takes you a little bit to really get into the groove of it, because each weapon has such a very different role to play. But then by the end, I remember even just being so excited once I had the Chaos Blades in 2018's version that you could kind of chain your cooldown abilities to just go one into the next, and now being able to just bounce between 3 different weapons, each with their own cooldown skills. I was in heaven, just throw the axe, do the throwing spear, throw the chaos blades down.
I feel this one, even with the new perspective, I feel Ragnarok even more than 2018 kind of taps more into the old school roots of God of War as a character action game, where the combos and spamming and all that. It had that in the 2018 version, but it was a little bit more subdued because they were trying the new perspective. There was less variety of enemies, and with this, with all the amounts of enemies, it sometimes throws at you, and different kinds of enemies that I was like, Jesus, they really took the criticism from the previous game to heart of you had very very few enemy variety. It was getting repetitive with like the things that you're fighting. They're like, nah, you're gonna fight so many kinds that it is way too late in the game before you can even remotely say that they're repeating enemies, because there's way too many of them now.
And each realm had their own versions of different things that each had different behaviors. The Einherjar had like 10 different versions of them that each had different weapons and moves, armor types, and the like captain dudes that look like Sauron.
Yeah.
Just those dudes were crazy. Each of them having different weapons. It's like there's so much going on that I was like not really getting overwhelmed because I was having the time of my life, but I was just like, oh shoot, that's a new guy, let's go. Yeah. And then just going into the fight. And man, it's so fun. It is so fun, and I can't stress that enough as somebody who loves hack and slash games.
Yeah. Now, do you feel that they could have implemented a jump button in this game?
I feel like it's possible, but it also would have made the puzzles maybe a little bit more complex. I feel it wouldn't have really changed all that much when you really break it down. The world is so built around it that I think that it would have been more almost cosmetic of like, all right, well, you need any of the jumps you require the grappling hook, which is higher than you could jump. Any of the regular jumps you can kind of jump across, and then from there it would just be part of like combat incorporation with like jumping and maybe doing a stab down move or something like that. So certainly it could have helped, but especially as Atreus, who's smaller. But I don't know how like useful it would have been.
I feel they found the middle spot with the giving the old school Zelda style of jumping, that as long as you're like sprinting,
it's like context. Yeah, because he kind of does a jump whenever you're sprinting, especially against enemies. And that kind of ties into it. It's just not a dedicated jump button, especially since you have your dodge and your rolls.
Yeah, because it makes me ask, because obviously Elden Ring also came out this year, the other big game of 2022, and that also continued what they had done with Sekiro, that it was the first Souls-like game, even though that one's not a true Souls-like like Elden Ring. It's more of a successor of what Dark Souls is, and that had a jump button. That I know some people say that added an extra thing to how you tackle some bosses there, that it just made me wonder, like, if you thought that they could have done that with God of War Ragnarok, that has a sort of similar control scheme, because it's the shoulder attacks. Which have you ever by any chance gone back to square and triangle? Like you left it as is?
No, I left it as is. I couldn't go back, especially after playing a default on 2018's version. I knew that my muscle memory was already there for it, because I love the feeling of holding down the L2 button to cock back and then use either R1 or R1 or R2 to let fly. As far as the jump thing, I think that would have made it a little too tricky, because Elden Ring has such a non-curated approach to its combat and its bosses especially.
Yeah.
And as we've also learned, the jump attacks were super broken in that game. So I am a little worried that it would have pulled some of that curated, really bombastic blockbuster feel from God of War if you're just spamming the jump button as Kratos against any of the... well, and we're talking spoilers, so against like Thor and against Odin or something, and the big scripted events and things like that. So I feel like it was more of a... I'm kind of glad they didn't in the end, but I'm glad they implemented it where they did in certain combats.
Yes. So that's why it's something that I was just thinking, but I didn't miss not having a jump on it, especially because they added slight verticality with having the thing with your Blades of Chaos that allows you to chain your way up specific places, even though it's not like full sandboxy that you can like chain yourself everywhere. It definitely never loses its curated feel, but I feel that's what makes it special in a way that kind of I was mentioning. It's like it's rare that we get like games that are this curated, because sandboxes are more the go-tos for many people, and sometimes that's the preference for them, not me. I prefer something a little bit more controlled. So that is just like an observation, but at least they added more verticality than the other one had. That was a little bit more flat in comparison. So to kind of reel away from like the combat, Paul, like just to go back with story and the big story moments.
Yeah.
Were you expecting Odin to be Tyr?
No.
That completely like
I still
shocked
want
me.
to go back because I mean, obviously, replaying the game is now going to add a whole nother level of depth to it because you know that Tyr was not Tyr the whole time. But then it makes me kind of question the whole idea because of the big setup in, hey, Tyr is alive. The fact that he died doesn't make sense, so he's got to be there. So if
do you want me to spoil it for you?
The whole time, wait. Well, tell me. How do you find it out? You're about to tell me.
So when you beat the game, new things are unlocked in the realms. Go to Niflheim.
Right.
You'll find something there. Yeah.
So that's all I need to know.
Yeah.
I'll take care of that then from here. So yeah, that's probably the only question that I had because I was like, well, then where is Tyr? What happened to him?
That'll be answer for you. Just go to Niflheim. Yeah.
Got it. That's all I need to know. Just golly though, everything. Let's see, story and big moments. Just from the beginning, with such a small moment of Atreus and Fenrir.
Yeah, that was
that from the beginning. I was like, oh, they've got me now. That at first I was like, okay, well, let's see what happens. I'm like, I'm worried, and then they hit us with that crap. And I mean,
after the sled chase.
Yeah, the sled chase with Freya. That was nuts to jump straight into it in 5 seconds, and it makes me, in hindsight, wonder even more how people were like, yeah, it's a slow start.
Yeah, the more I was hearing more, because I was like dumbstruck. I was like, wow, how is this a slow start? And the slow start is like what people would define what happens after you fight Thor. From Thor until the end of Svartalheim. Yeah. But that's the thing.
It was slower, but...
Yeah. But that's the thing. Like, it's weird for me to call that a slow start. I would say it's more of a plateau. Like, it starts you really strong, then it plateaus for a little bit before it lands you with the character switch. So, but slow start is like, I keep hearing that. I'm like, I can't agree. I absolutely cannot agree. It's like that game like hooked me right from the very beginning. Like, just thinking about the other one, that it was like you chop the wood off, put the thing in, like go put face, body like on fire, and then take Atreus on his like training hunt before like until you fight the troll. This was a much
zero combat in all of that too.
There was a little bit that because it was introduction. It was like it gives you the control schemes and all that, but
even then, I don't think you actually fight anybody until you're hunting after Atreus during the hunt. That's when the first enemy shows up.
And after a little bit of a technical hiccup there, real quick, so continue, Paul.
So yeah, I believe I was talking about the first combat encounter where you were running through with Atreus because I was playing on hard and I got my crap messed up. After that, basically, comparatively leading into such an amazing payoff for, that's what it was, the secret ending of 2018 where they face off against Thor being the Vision, starting us off basically with that, almost subverting a little bit of the expectations where they walk in and have a conversation, but then we just go straight into the craziness.
Yeah, but on top of that, the introduction of Odin.
Yeah. There. What a weird, smooth talking used car salesman he ended up being.
Well, have you ever seen The West Wing?
No.
Like the TV show. So the actor Richard Schiff plays Toby from The West Wing. That he's such an expert of walking and talking and going to be like like go into this whole like political mumbo jumbo that I tell you that kind of told you that I have a feeling that they had an idea for Odin, and then when they cast Toby from The West Wing, they put all sort of political dialogue that would make you remind you of, if you've ever seen The West Wing, you should look Toby from West Wing and see a couple videos in YouTube from it. It's just so funny how they were able to convey that with this version of Odin that again is like a completely different from what we're used to from the Old Father. Like just recently with Assassin's Creed Valhalla, their version of Odin, or even the Marvel Cinematic Universe version of Odin with Anthony Hopkins. I much prefer this version because this Odin, I tell you, is like he got me tricked.
Yeah, like, even to the very end, I was like, man, he's making a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Like he's really getting me. And honestly, if he hadn't messed himself up, which of course that's like Odin's whole thing is he ruins things for himself. He could have had peace.
Yeah.
Because he was making all the sense in the world. Oh man!
But then he goes in and does the big death of the game, which is Brock's death.
Gosh, and it's really funny. I just wanted to mention one thing. I've been watching one of my favorite YouTubers play through that. I just started it after having finished the game, and as he gets like accidentally jump scared by Brock showing up, and he's like, man, I hope you die. And then I was like, I can't wait to go back once he's done. Oh, because like I can't be commenting like, look at that moment. That's gonna like ruin it for so many people. But
yeah, by the way, like this game very masterfully does like camera pans to sometimes like scare you. I had like when Atreus comes back from the Ironwoods, which is gonna be like the more controversial part of this game.
Yeah.
And like when he's hiding inside his old house while the zombies are outside, and and one of them like breaks in from like behind. Such a nice smooth transition. Then when you fight them, and then you go to the portal, and then he like jumps in, and then the camera pans in as he walks in, and that's when Kratos walks in. Yeah.
And he walks right into Kratos. The camera being like the third character of any scene is so great because it has such personality to it. Just a brief fast forward to that escape sequence where Kratos is holding Freyr on his back,
who is Freya's brother from Vanaheim.
Yes. And it's so hard to say that verbally without accidentally saying Freya
and Freyr.
Yeah. So just the way the camera is like jumping as if it's a person running with him the whole time, panning over his shoulder as things happen, with him like smashing the lizard creature along his shield against the wall and throwing his axe through the watchtower and just busting through it. I love the way the camera follows the action. From that, the big bombastic ending, and even into the big moments where there's like just a single tear running down somebody's back and the camera just kind of goes in right there.
Yeah.
And it's just,
I feel like one of the most masterful uses of the camera is the visit to the Fates at the Well of Ord.
Ooh, yeah.
That was such a masterful scene of like those three sisters kind of like mocking both Kratos and Freya, and the way the camera was like panning left and right, and and the music, by my God, Bear McCreary is the guy that made the soundtrack for 2018 and this one.
Yes,
he absolutely like he was already great in 2018. Somehow he outdid himself. And by the way, do you remember there's a dwarf that plays music?
Yeah,
that's Bear McCreary.
That's him. Yeah. Oh, I knew there had to be some kind of significance to that guy, because at first I thought, I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll see him again because he's like really well fleshed out as a character. And then I was just like, I haven't seen that dude in a while. What was the deal with that? But gosh, yeah, like just mentioning the music briefly, there was a moment where it was at the end of the game, and it was like the big horns and triumphant music as everything was happening. I'm walking down those stairs, and I could just feel myself getting emotional. I was like, oh my goodness, there's so much happening. Yeah,
I feel this is the closest one of these kinds of games are gonna give us the feeling of that final battle in Avengers Endgame.
Yeah, and I know it's gonna be played out so much because people are gonna say it, but it really bears the similarities of how big and bombastic and impressive all of that was, even down to the portals opening up of different armies coming out to join you in the final fight as you open that last door, and Kratos just like he doesn't even have to say anything. He just is like, all right, I'm running, y'all can follow me, but even if you don't, I'm going for this. And he just rushes through into all of the freaking crazy sky lasers and blasts and going on. Oh my goodness, I wish I could replay that mission.
And I hope you do it in a big TV. That's what I was telling you. I was like, oh God, how I wish you could have seen that in your big TV, because that's where I saw it. I was like, man, I can't imagine experiencing that for the first time, not with the most optimal setup possible. But obviously everyone's budget's different, and not everyone's gonna have access to like a big TV. But this is one of the few games that I feel it justifies its spectacle and its detail to be experienced in as big a screen as possible. Because
you know that there's got to be somebody on YouTube already trying to chain that together into a big cinematic for a YouTube video, and I'm gonna go back and watch that because I'm sure there's like so many details you miss as you're like rushing through yourself. But I would try to like pause here and there to like check out the stuff that was going on the side, and that's how I saw all the wolves were like rushing through some dudes at one point
with Fenrir.
But then I felt the urgency of the moment. I was like, oh, I gotta keep going, guys.
I feel like there's a way to be able to like keep the momentum going on that final scene while also you can pan around and see like everything that's happening. I did see a little bit of Jormungandr fighting Thor, like and me finally clicking that the snake from the Ironwoods was Jormungandr this whole time.
I realized it not at first. But there was a point where he mentioned that Angerboda mentioned that the snake had gotten bigger, and that went, oh, there it is. And I made the connection finally. I should have, because they lingered so much on its eyes, which were that distinctive orange and red, which was obviously Jormungandr's look. But I loved going to look in the back because I remember like in the myth that was the whole deal with it, and then I realized they were kind of twisting the myth of Loki is the one that technically gives birth to Jormungandr. So they were like, oh, he created him by putting the
because
soul
in the myth
snake.
Supposedly Loki is the father of Jormungandr and Fenrir, and
sort of the mother as well, honestly, because Loki's weird like that. But they just kind of flub that and kind of change things around, which I'm very appreciative for. And
do you notice that they completed the prophecy of Thor hitting Jormungandr so hard that he went back in time. So
that was really cool to see, and just all of the tiny like they did so much research into this crap. And I just to also sidestep again to the look of Asgard, I appreciate that so much, where it's like the perfect place where the Aesir live isn't necessarily going to be the way certain other places always like to portray it. It's going to be just this idyllic rural place with really nice wooden beam houses, essentially, like protected by a giant wall. It's like that makes sense, and it looks like I want to live there. And it just,
with the exception of a big beast bringing a sword that destroys the realm.
Ignoring that side of it, you know. But I'm sure all the Aesir were like, nah, I'm sure that's fine. It's, you know, Surtur is fake news, everybody, and we are fine in Asgard. Thank you. Oh gosh, that was weird. Anyway, so I loved Asgard's look, and it was so just chill, like hills of white. The White Hills of Dover kind of look to it, as opposed to the really weird sci-fi, like everything's crazy Technicolor. My goodness, just
Sony Cinematica mentioned specifically the way they wanted to portray Norse mythology. They wanted to be as opposite as they could be from how it was portrayed by Marvel.
I'm glad. I knew they had to have somebody in the back of their tables, just like, remember, it can't be the MCU. Can't look like it at all. Can't feel like it at all. And like,
technically, it's more true to the myths, especially with Thor. Like, Thor is not a blonde, muscular dude. It's like he's that redhead, disheveled brute. Which, by the way, that it's so funny. Like, I think is the second to last or the last section that you play as Atreus in Asgard, when you have that whole fight at the bar. At Valhalla.
I forgot to mention that to y'all. I was having the time of my life in that thing because of how silly it kind of was.
It does, but like how epic the camera started moving and all the
like the way it felt like the Kingsman church scene, where it was like this chaotic one cut, just silly, wild nonsense going on between like Loki's punching and Harryar on the side of a cart, and Thor throws a body on it, throwing Loki up over the side, and it's like, this is just the best. I'm having the time of my life. And like speaking of characters in that, Thrud,
Yeah.
I was not expecting to be such a strong character throughout that,
especially with her introduction. The introduction was like, oh, you're weird.
Yeah, and gosh, what weird 80s hair she had, but like it works because I mean Thor's got crazy red hair, Sif's got crazy blonde hair, so of course their daughter would have really weird hair. And being like the sister of two murdered brothers now by Loki, and that whole dynamic.
And that's why I keep telling you that it's gonna be great playing these two back to back eventually during a dry spell.
And I'm just impressed at the breadth of characters that I had no idea about, because in 2018 I was like, I don't even know who the equivalent of the Pantheon is for the Norse mythology, and I guess we'll see how that plays out. And now it's like that's the de facto look for any of those Norse gods and goddesses that I can imagine now. They're all so well designed, they're so unique looking, they all have their own fit within that. Their family dynamic is just crazy, and I love it. And it's just, I meant to mention it as well, but during Atreus's moments in Asgard, I got such Kingdom Hearts 358 Days Over 2 vibes of like Roxas in the organization and getting paired with one of the many brooding and vaguely evil people, and like having to rely on them for help, but them teaching him begrudgingly and slowly growing to kind of respect him. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm just this is like big budget of Kingdom Hearts spin-off game. Oh, and I really entertained that side of it, where it's just And
you said that you really liked this version of Heimdall also, right?
Yeah, I wasn't expecting it. I mean, for the longest time it was, of course, Thor from the Marvel stories that really had my idea of Heimdall. But this one, despite being an absolute arrogant little crap, it was like somehow entertaining to watch him. Where usually I get really bothered with like arrogant evil characters, even though a lot of people like love to hate them. This was like the one exception for me, where I was just like, I'm gonna love watching this dude get wrecked.
No, and you know who he reminded me of, because it's a fun like symmetry. He reminds me of Hermes from God of War 3. Strong bias, and Hermes was also an annoying little crap.
And like, especially his demise was very old God of War style as well. In the midst of all the rest, where a lot of them, surprisingly, a large amount of the big fights don't end in the death of whatever Kratos is fighting. And this is one of the few exceptions where he just rips into this guy justifiably because he's terrible.
But after trying to give him an out, because remember that's the point of the story where they're like talking about they're trying to defy prophecy, but everything that they're doing is just fulfilling it, and he just gives that extra weight to everything that's happening in that story, because you know their intentions, but are the intentions enough to be able to like sidestep what's been prophesied from them? And that level of tension is like, it just makes the final few hours of that story from the Heimdall death onward just an immediate page turner. When I told you that, when you told me where you were, I was like, this is the point where you can start mainlining it and you're not going to stop.
And I could feel that for sure. Like the only other moment that almost felt like a side quest disguised as a main one was the Freyr situation, where you kind of drop in and you're like, oh, hey, Freyr's been captured. Go help him. And then I was like, okay, let's go. And then like it turned into one of my favorite moments of that escape.
That you have him carrying, and everything is like kind of like shifting around you. That ends with the flying boat.
Yes, that flying boat moment. Like that's the stuff that I love, that people used to not think was possible to adapt,
Mm.
where it's like, oh, this is too weird, we can't put that into our stories. And even with like so many things from the Greek storylines, they had to adapt and change so much because they felt like it was like, this is too weird. But now you just put one to one the crap that happens in Norse mythology, and like, yeah, there's like this thing, it's like a disc, and then you throw it and it unfolds into a giant glowing boat that can fly, and I'm like,
Yeah.
hell yes.
Here's this two wolves, Cole and Hattie, that they're literally like bring day and night to Vanaheim. So
yes, and I just love how balls to the wall they are about how weird it is, but it's like they own it. Especially the explanation for dwarven magic. I latched onto that way more than I thought I would, where going through this moment in Svartalfheim with Brock and Kratos going to get his new weapon. The spear, and then Brock explaining how dwarven magic works was so cool and had me like trying to think of ways that it worked, where he's like, the nature of a thing is worth more than the form of a thing, and using it at first in a literal example where he can steal the sound of the wind to store it in a bag to possibly use as part of the spear, but then later on really stretching that concept for Brock himself, and then even just the way that everything really works. And I think what he said, one of the dwarven women made armor out of dog barks once, and that's like, that's so cool and weird. I want to see more of this.
I have to say, this game was funny in many spots. That reading of Kratos saying that he doesn't want a snack.
Yes.
Was like,
want a snack.
Yeah, it's so perfect. Like Christopher Judge just nailed it. Nailed.
If you later on walk over by the pot, one of them, he's like, I knew you wanted a snack.
Yeah, there's so much incidental dialogue that happens with if you're just walking straight into places, not even having to press triangle. Yeah, it like happens.
Just by your actions, they react to you, and I've loved that, because having to put so many prompts in front of somebody to interact can kind of distract from it, especially when your goal is to not put as much on the screen as you can. It can cause some difficulty for people who don't know how to interact with the examples in front of you. Case in point, some of the moments of like Freya or Atreus going, hey, look at that, and then like they're just kind of vaguely looking in that direction. You have to figure it out. But then sometimes where it's like they're just kind of talking about things, and by you walking by is exactly what Kratos would do. So therefore they start talking about what you did. And it's kind of cool. Just by existing, you're part of the story.
Now, by the way, were you okay, or were you annoyed by how often they would tell you what to do if you were like in a puzzle area? Because right now that is a big contentious point about this game, because ironically it also happened with Horizon's Forbidden West, where Aloy was a chatty catty that she was just.
That's right, because they had to patch it in to take out her talking so much. To answer your question, it's in two parts. One, yes, it annoyed me in the sense of when you got a status ailment, because every single time
you're on fire, brother. It'll pass. You're on fire, brother.
The only one that I thought was kind of funny was when the first time it happened and it was Atreus with me.
Yeah.
He's like, you're on fire, but you probably already know that. So it's like, clever.
Yeah, that happened to me in Muspelheim. Yeah.
And I will be honest, the first time I didn't know what it was supposed to look like. I almost didn't realize it, because you'll notice that as a gaming individual, you focus so much on what is important that you almost don't notice what's going on over here, which is where Kratos is. You don't look at Kratos, you look at what Kratos is aiming at. So the fact that the status effect is shown on him and a tiny little icon above the health bar, it's easy to miss, especially because you die so quickly. So I could see how like the quick reminder of that happening can kind of be important. Unfortunately, it kind of plays out to be really annoying. As far as the puzzles go, your boy is very directionally challenged. So I kind of needed a lot of those, honestly.
Yeah.
because I knew I was like, all right, I'm really struggling with this. I know that within the next 30 seconds to a minute, the NPC with me is going to find where I need to go and help me out a little bit, because I kind of needed it. I got lost a lot of times. There was a moment with Thrud and Atreus where I was like, I don't know where to go, and she finally found this area.
When you're in Helheim?
Yeah, that's the one. So for me personally, I was really appreciative of it, but I can also understand why a lot of people were like, oh my gosh, shut up. And you know how that whole song and dance goes, which I don't know. It makes me sad that people are like smart enough that they don't need the problems, that they forget that there's a lot of people that really do need it.
Yeah, I feel that I have no problem with the with them giving you this much help, because they know that this game, especially seeing how it's selling, that it's selling a lot. From what I'm hearing,
so,
is like
we said at the start of this, if this is your first game into like gaming, you're gonna need a lot of those context clues that normally people just kind of assume. But go ahead.
I also feel that, considering just how extensive this game is with options, with accessibility and all that, it wouldn't have hurt them to do a toggle of like, shut up your companion for the people, because there's so many people that are like, no, I really want to figure this out by myself, because there's so many people that are like I'm just gonna say, it's to tie their egos a little too much into that. But because I feel like I appreciate, especially with how many options it's given, I would like the options also to be offered in both ways. Give you enough context cues for you that you're mentally handicapped. Just kidding. When it comes to like you get lost often. Like you lose direction often. Like
and especially in the middle of a fight where you're dodging, you're moving around. Sometimes, especially if you're in a tunnel, I'll finish the fight and go, which way did I come from? And so it's like sometimes you just kind of need
on top of the unreliable compass. So
that's a big one.
So that's why I was like, I don't mind it, because here's the thing, like I wouldn't want them to be entirely shut up, because I tell you, I notice it more here. It is crucial for you to hear when your character tells you from behind you, like in the middle of combat.
That's really helpful.
That really helps, because there's like this red circle beneath in your like where your belt is, that is sometimes like yellow and red, that can sometimes give you like a visual cue of enemies that might be behind you, because obviously like you control the camera, so you sometimes you have to be aware of the spatial awareness of the things that you're not seeing. And I did this one time. I did the Muspelheim challenges, and which are kind of similar to how they did them in the 2018 game. And during those, I lowered the volume and put a podcast on. I was getting destroyed because I was like, I had not realized how, because I had played most of this game with headsets, which is really because this game has amazing, impeccable sound design. That I had not realized how much inherent the Mimir or whoever your partner is at a time, telling you where you're sometimes being attacked, is so important for you to like really be able to dodge and do the combat more efficiently. That's one thing that, maybe there's some people that may want to have it really hard and they want to just have the red circle and try to figure that out on themselves. But I tell you, like, it's the aid you get from all the voices while you're in combat. It's way more precise than I gave it credit for. And I actually kind of want to go back to the 2018 game and really hone in on that to see if it's always been this precise.
I don't know if it was as often, but I do remember having played it just this year. Or last year.
This year. This year.
I do remember, especially Mimir going like, "To your left, brother."
I know that was there, but I didn't feel its importance like I did with here. And I wonder if it's because there's more enemies in this game than in 2018.
At that one, you really, unless you were doing the combat trials, I don't remember you getting swamped with more than like 4 enemies, maybe. And usually that was like, there was 4 of like the smaller enemies, and they normally didn't throw too many of the bigger ones at you, but this time it's like they'll throw 2 bosses at you, as you saw, and they'll throw a lot of other enemies at you, like a Destiny raid boss. So it's like you just need to really keep your head on a swivel at all times, and because they don't wait to they don't do that gaming rule where it's like, oh, they'll only attack you if you're looking at them, but it's like they will absolutely beat the crap out of you if your back is turned. So especially because of how closed in it feels, because you're so close on on Kratos's back, I really appreciate how often they do those call outs, and it feels kind of nice because you're like part of a team that they're calling out for you, asking for help, shooting something that's about to hit you, and it feels so good. And I mean, I don't know if you remember back when I was reviewing Devil May Cry 5, there was that moment where you were fighting alongside V and Nero and a bunch of these other enemies, and there was a point where I was one of the two characters and I hit one of the enemies, and the NPC like grabs the character I threw and like knocked him down for me. This was that same feeling where I was like, oh, I'm like part of this unit that is just helping each other out and taking things down, and it felt super cathartic, and I loved it. So yeah, as far as the communication goes during combat, 100% yes.
Yeah. Now, as for, let's talk about like our favorite and least favorite moments, Paul. Like, because this game is filled with amazing moments. Do you have one that like sticks up with you? Because I'm debating between two right now.
Yeah.
Because of like which one was my absolute favorite. Because one of them is happened in the main story. Is one of the moments that I mentioned was very cathartic. But I also appreciate a very emotional moment that happened in one of the side quests at Alfheim.
I think I know which one you're talking about. I really did like that one as well. I think
Jellyfish.
That's the one.
Yeah.
So my favorite moments, almost across the board, besides the big bombast, because of course I'm a huge sucker for those, were the little moments between Atreus and Kratos.
Yeah.
There's the one moment right before the big fight where Atreus goes into your tent and asks if he can stay with you,
and tells you and asks him to tell a story because to try to fall asleep.
Yeah, and Kratos never finishes that story. I was so hoping that he would get to say it, because now I was like invested, and I was like,
no,
what did he say?
He finishes the story after
the game's finished. Do
you fully finish the game to get credits?
Yeah.
He tells that same story when you're walking up with Atreus and Angorbora to show the new one of the shrines, the secret shrines from Faye.
Yeah, where it ends and you see Kratos finds the other half of it, right?
I
don't remember him saying that.
Yeah, while they're walking up there, like,
now Atreus, I don't know.
Yeah,
I need to find out.
Yeah, Atreus tells him like, Dad, can you finish that story you told me? And then as you're walking up towards that shrine, Kratos finishes that story.
What the heck? I feel like I was so engrossed in all that. I feel like I would have noticed that. But anyway,
he
I'll have to find out the details. So yeah,
but in the moment in the tent.
Yeah, so like Atreus has fallen asleep and Kratos like sits there with his hand heavy on Atreus's shoulder, and like the true emotion finally shows on Kratos's face, and like you can feel him saying I love you, like finally in that moment, and then he goes to sleep. And
then has that final moment with Faye.
Yeah, that was great. I mean, Faye is one of the areas where I was like, what I expected kind of was like, there was no way it was going to meet that. Because Faye just felt like she was kind of berating Kratos the whole time that she was in her scenes. And I know there's a lot going on with that, but for some reason, Faye's scenes didn't really grab me all that as much for some reason.
The final one did.
The final one was good, especially because they finally had that big moment where they touched foreheads and it was like, all right, you need to do this for me, for our son. And I was like, all right, I get it. But anyway,
it's because in the scenes with Faye is where you see Kratos' reluctance as a father. It's like, and from the very first moment that you see Faye, which is played by Deborah Ann Wall, Karen Page from the Daredevil show from Netflix that got canceled, that's on Disney Plus now. I immediately recognized her. I was like, oh, she has the same face as Deborah Ann Wall. That's when you see that it's like a flashback sort of to like a time before Atreus, the birth of Atreus, and seeing like Kratos like still being haunted by the ghost of his past, and that was like the cathartic moment of him finally realizing that he has to be in the present to be for Atreus and fulfill Faye's desire for him, which is to live, which is what that final shrine was about. That
right, and that was so. as far as the meaning that went, it was, I wanted to make sure that I understood it fully,
Yeah.
being that the future was telling that Kratos would finally get the adoration and worship from mortals, right? Like he would earn that spot.
Yeah.
Okay, so that I just wanted to make sure I understood it, because they never like flat out said what that meant.
It's something that's meant to be visual for you to like really like right. It's like it's artful. It's an artful ending.
Right, it is. Which, I mean, I do appreciate it. I think I wanted to make sure. I was like, am I getting the message that they were wanting to tell me out of that? But yeah, anyway, so
it makes sense if you remember the dialogue between Kratos and Odin. When Odin
like,
asked him,
have you ever had anybody worship you?
Mm-hmm.
Which, like, I that's where I was kind of making sure that I understood that one.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that, and then the very last scene where Atreus and Angerboda are chatting excitedly with each other. And the camera just slowly continues to pan in as Kratos is just watching the whole time silently. And then he finally turns around and like triumphantly puts his foot up on a rock and looks out on the horizon. And then he looks back and smiles at you. And I was just like, oh my gosh, he's like my son.
Exactly. It's like the sun is leaving the nest. Yeah.
And I like, because I got so excited about it, and then because I wanted Atreus to stay in the game for longer, I felt the same thing that Kratos did in that moment, where he's like, I have to let him do this. And I was just like, go my son. And like that was one of the moments that I started crying. And then of course the big triumphant music as you're walking back down the stairs afterwards, and I'm just like, oh man, this is crazy. So
they nailed it.
The one of the biggest moments for me was the last few seconds of the game. Just it proves how great they did of this. So yeah, that's it for me on the favorite moments. Did you want to say a few of yours before we talked about any of the least?
Yeah, the two. I'll mention the two of them because I just want to give a shout out and just how important doing side quests it is for this game. I feel that if you just mainline this, I think you may enjoy the story and some of those moments will land, but there's such important character development between Kratos and Atreus and even Freya that you can earn just by doing those side quests. That moment where in Alfheim, after you do the first big mission with Tyr, and Tyr runs away, and when he's scared, it's like, yeah, just destruction just follows you. And then Kratos kind of like remembers that what Atreus had mentioned about like he was feeling something like an anguish somewhere in the desert, and he's like, Atreus, where was the thing? And let's go to and kind of let's go see that. And Atreus is like all confused, like, why do you care? Why do you like why do you want to do this? And then Kratos is like, do you really need me to say why or something like that? He's like, no, it's just like, I know I'm usually the one doing this, but that's not you. And then when you free that first jellyfish, there's two of them. One you get with Freya, the other one the first one is with Atreus, the other one you can get with Freya. Right. And that first one, when then you free that jellyfish, you get that majestic moment, which is in the trailer, that you see the big jellyfish going into the air. Yeah. And then Atreus still asks, like, what do you think? Like, so why did we do this? And then Mimir was like, lad, I cannot believe that you don't understand why Kratos do this. Kratos doing this because he wants to spend more time with you. And especially because that's still the prophecy before them saying it outright to each other. That because at that point, remember, Atreus didn't know that he had not seen the image of Kratos' dead body in his arms.
Yeah, it was just Kratos seeing it. And honestly, the 2018 version of that looked so much more nefarious. Where I thought it was Atreus like killing Kratos from the 2018. So I was like, oh, he's gonna like turn on Kratos. It's gonna be this big prophesied like vengeance thing. I don't know, because I thought he was like the one killing him. So then they kind of reframed all of it from there, and I was like, oh, they really kind of almost tricked us, but like at the same time, it's like the characters were tricked as well because they thought a certain level of things. But man, like it could go back and forth between us for like the next hour and
I
a half.
know,
Being
but
like,
I
you
just
remember when this crazy thing happened?
no. To me, like what hit me really emotionally about that cycle is just kind of like the idea of just putting it in the last, like putting it in kind of like in real world context. Imagine if you had your parent with a terminal illness.
Yeah.
And he wants to spend like more time with, like he wants to spend more time with you because he doesn't know how much time it's left. That's what it reminded me of. And and that's kind of what it is, and what it like the kind of emotions it could like hit with in such a subtle way that if you have had that moment happen to you, it resonates so hard. But to me, like the most emotional cathartic moment was the Garm fight, because that's when it finally hit me that the big loss at the beginning, which was Atreus putting Fenrir to sleep, was gonna come full circle. He was gonna have that happy moment of with his power that he can absorb souls and put them like in different things. And he has been carrying Fenrir with him, which is the reason why, in a subtle way, you understand why he transforms into a wolf.
Yeah.
When you have like the rage attack with him.
Once he finishes, you transform into a bear instead. And it's like, ooh. Which there was a part of me that was like, man, it'd be crazy to be able to play as Atreus after the game's over and be able to transform into a bear like this. And then of course they were like, no, you're not doing that.
Yeah, and the bear is also a very significant moment because that was like the bear that he killed out of rage when he had to put Fenrir out at the beginning, and that awesome scene where you're walking back to your home and then you see like the dead body and the two cubs are just there like that, and then they look at you, and then Kratos was like, mistakes happen, we live with them. And then just having that moment where he finally realizes, because Angrboda kind of teases that he had Fenrir with him, but she didn't want to outright tell him. That was something that it was gonna come out to him. And then when he puts Fenrir after such an insane boss fight, was like again an amazing spectacle. Like you facing that big wolf, especially if you're playing that with an HDR and like the dark background of hell with that huge wolf, and beating it. Especially it has a fun moment where you think you beat him when you're like hanging. It's like, well, there goes that wolf. And then as you start moving, and then the wolf keeps coming back, and then you have that escape scene,
and it's like, run.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I loved all of that, and then to finally show Atreus's competence as his own character, figuring out his own way out of the problem by not only solving the problem but bringing back his precious Fenrir, and like the big silly eyes as the wolf is just,
I know, it's so
adorable.
Funny because it's so funny because it's such a big wolf. That's what's so hilarious is he's so massive, but he has that kind of like that puppy love.
Yeah, that puppy energy to him, and it made me so happy to see.
Do you do the side quest in the Lake of the Nine of the 4 raid camps?
Yes,
that was like scaring the other 2 wolves.
I love that as well.
That ended up with Kratos finally petting them, and because he was like being contemptuous about those wolves, and then Freya and Mimir kind of like
calling him out,
calling him out on that, and it just so much pet love here that then because having done that in that side quest, and then having that moment with Fenrir where he's like sit. And he's like home, and then he turns the thing open and just leaves.
It's so great, the payoff, the setup and payoff. I guess I did want to mention one more thing while we're in the favorite moments. The very personal relationship I have with Atreus, and specifically the concept of a father who feels like his last days are always upon him, so he's obsessed with training his son into the perfect instrument. Because my dad, for all of his life, had this belief that something bad would happen to him, so he would teach me constantly different skills way before I ever should have learned them. I knew how to balance a checkbook at like 10. Because he was so sure that something would happen, because granted, he lost both of his parents, one of which, his mom when he was 5, and then his dad when he was like maybe only in his 40s or something. And so he was like always doing this to me. So I understood where Atreus was like, where he's like, I love my dad, I always will, but sometimes I get really pissed off by the fact that he can't just let me be a kid. And so when it was finally the big between the two of them, and then Atreus was able to trust Kratos at the very end to say, like, when Kratos asks him, like, does this scare you, what you're about to do? And Atreus is like, yes, this is like really afraid, like I'm afraid of this.
And that's why you should do
like,
it.
That's why you should do it. And then the Atreus, of course, like, yeah, you're right. Like, you're absolutely right. And now I'm like, oh, I wish I could like do that, have that interaction with my own dad to like truly reach out and then let me go.
It's like just the couple times they both embrace, like they both hug. It's like there's just something.
Yes, the physical touch between them. It was like finally, because he goes through the whole of the 2018 game and it's like about to put his hand on him and then decides not to. And now like starting the game, they kind of have that little side hug, but then finally ending it with that big like true hug between the two of them.
And they're definitely put through the ringer, especially like when they separate, and then when Atreus has to go on by himself, and then Kratos not knowing how to deal with the fact that he had left. That then when he finally returns after the whole thing with Asgard kind of goes sideways, when he frees Garm by accident, and then everyone's like scolding. It's like, why do you free Garm? It's like Garm is like so dangerous, and then Kratos is like, no. With him, and then Kratos just doesn't reprimand him like you would have expected him to, like he did earlier when he went to what you could consider is my least favorite moment of the game, which is the Iron Woods. That's gonna be like many people's least favorite moment, which because it's an extended sequence of you meeting Angrboda and you go through that hidden woods of Jotunheim and getting so much like backstory, but it's like very like it funnels you in a lot. There's a lot of conversation, a lot of slow walking. And I didn't mind it, especially because near the end, there's like two borderline ridiculous moments. You fight against her grandma, Gorilla, which is like the most insane, like silly, dumb, but so fun boss fight. Fighting a grandma with like her big pot.
And it was really just, especially when you look at it from hindsight, I can also see how a lot of people that previously played through the whole game were like, some of this didn't really need to be here. Because,
or maybe shorter. They can like slash maybe an hour there.
Especially because of how much of like this gathering you do with the yak, how much of the conversations you have. You go to the tapestry like twice. The upgrade area for him not really serving much of a purpose besides like right at the start. And
if you get all the upgrades early, it's like you don't need many upgrades after.
There's nothing for Atreus to do for his upgrades after a certain point at all. So yeah, it was like some of that was just a little bit weird. Like the walking through the house took a good amount of time, and there was a point where I was like, I got to the part with the snake and the soul and all that stuff, and the fact that I had to just backtrack, I was confused because I was like, wait, that was it? We're just gonna go back the way we came? So yeah, there was just a few of those moments that kind of grated on me, but overall, like the fact that Ironwood just looked so cool.
Visually stunning.
And
great story. I would say, like, even if it takes you there for a while, like I didn't need to go into a cave to the story for like pieces of where the little lizards show up.
Took
like,
way too long for that.
I was like, I didn't need that, but that boss fight with the grandma was just such a cool idea of seeing what a giant actually looks like, that actually a live giant, and how tiny you are in comparison. That's what made it.
I loved Angrboda as a character.
Some people were like, she's the traditional pixie girl, but I don't mind because I actually do like how whimsical this game is. Like, we didn't even talk about Ratatoskr.
Oh my goodness.
Ratatoskr, like
the talking squirrel.
Amazing. Just voiced by Sun Cho, the TikToker, like voicer, that he did an incredible job with Rat. Every time that I would go back to Sindri's house, I would go there kind of thing. I just want to listen to him because it's just so funny, such funny dialogue, especially with the bitter squirrel and the other ones kind of like adding dialogue.
Yeah.
And
the fact that Troy Baker is the very small lines
the
character
squirrel,
and then the dude that was a YouTuber is the main squirrel is just perfect. And I feel like it really fits for them because he's just got that whimsical feel to his voice. And is just like, welcome, gentlemen. It's wonderful to see you. And I was like, yes.
And to me, just thinking about canonically thinking that this game is also in canon with the Greek Dark games makes it even funnier.
It's like, man, something really went wrong over in Greece because Norse area, we're just chilling. Because, oh man, it's so funny. You see something like Zeus and Ratatoskr could theoretically have had a conversation with each other.
And I'm just cackling. I'm absolutely cackling. It's like, I just love, I feel it does great humor. I never think it goes to Marvel with Joss Whedon humor, thankfully.
No,
because like that's always the fear.
Characters that should do, but in such a concise way that it works. And it's never the they fly now kind of a feel. It's very like, each character responds to the same stimulus in a different way, where like Brock says a very different thing than Sindri would, and Freya would say a very different thing to each of them. And it's like, then the fact that each of those people bounce off each other because their personalities are so well fleshed out that it's like, it's no one person is saying the same quippy thing. And it's like each of them have their own feel, and I love all of it. So do you want to talk about any least favorite moments besides the Ironwood?
I think that's my only one that I can think, and because then it's not least favorite moment, but it's kind of like what I mentioned at the top, just kind of like the lesser qualities of the game, which are the things that when it comes to like exploration already mentioned, especially because I really went that down the deep end. There's even, did you ever open the bigger Vanaheim map that I mentioned you?
I did. Actually, no, because when the opportunity appeared and you could have followed the dog's tracks, that was after you'd already told me to mainline. So then I was like, okay, well, I know, even though my instincts are to like, I must follow this dog. You had already told me, so I was like, all right, I'm just gonna burn through because I want to make
that's
sure.
That's kind of what I wanted you to do, that follow that dog, open the map, and then just go do the mainline stuff, because as soon as you open the map, you open a portal. A portal is literally next to you, so you could have just gone to Sindri's house from there.
Okay. I wasn't sure if I was going to get wrapped into it, so I was like, I'm going to play it safe on this one.
So that's a great expansive area. I really like it. There's a specific area south from that big map that you're going to open that's where the compass started like really grating on me, because I was like, it didn't make sense. I had gone to one part, I had arrived to one part, and then for the life of me, I had forgotten how to get back there. And I just kept going in circles and circles and circles and circles and circles because I had a brain fart of, how can I get to this place? It doesn't make any sense. And the radar told me to go to this place that is closed when I know how to go to the other place. So
for me, there was a spot in Midgard that's exactly that. It's the spot with like the arm statue that Atreus went through at the start of the game, where you can go back through. The compass just freaks out in that segment because it was trying to tell me to go around it to another area, and it just kept like ping-ponging me, and you couldn't like get it. It looks deceptive because it looks like you can just go through and kind of take a left and get back into the main area, but you have to do this whole roundabout way. You have to lift the stone, move that out of the way, you got to crouch down, and it's such a pain in the butt. So yeah, the compass is a kind of a frustrating thing. The map is just, the icons are too big to see exactly where you need to be sometimes.
But I will say this, the map is somehow more practical to use here than in 2018. At least it can at least point to where you're standing. Before, it was like very vague of where you were really standing in it.
That's true, because it was kind of like, hey, you're in this area, but I couldn't tell you where. So yeah, I'll give it that. It's still an improvement. As far as I wanted to, besides quality of life, there's not much that I would say. I mean, I'd say as far as plot goes,
it's just few flaws, huh?
Certainly. And there's one area, I think I touched on it earlier, just like you said, less of Ironwood, and I would almost say more of Fae. because what we get from characterizing, it's justified, but this is a Fae that is frustrated with Kratos' shenanigans. So all you really get of her is her kind of being a little annoyed at him at most of the moments she's in there and calling him out on crap, as opposed to, like, I know that she was probably this awesome, like, all we know from context is she was this awesome Norse warrior. She used the axe, so I kind of pictured somebody a little bulkier that could really put Kratos through his paces.
I can't wait. I can't wait for you to do that Vanaheim part. It has to do with Faye.
Okay, so is there like any moments with her where they just kind of talk about her more?
Dialogue. You find so much, because you go into a place, it's called a crater. In fact, animation director Bruno Velasquez, the guy that we read earlier this year, he promised us that this game was coming out this year. Remember earlier back in in April, when he's the one that he tweeted, everyone please go do the crater, and absolutely go do the crater. Other than just how expansive it is as an exploration place, I kind of tell you that it reminded me visually of whatchamacallit, of Uncharted 4's Madagascar level, the one that when you're in the car. Early on, when you
told me it was really that big. It's kind of crazy how hidden it is. Usually the rest kind of bring you to it first.
This is far off.
This one
north
is like
in Vanaheim. Yeah.
Hey, there's kind of a thing, but you can go do it. And even like, I would have done it out of curiosity if you hadn't told me. But at the same time, I did not get the vibe that I was about to go into one of those big areas. All the rest of them, it's like, hey, there's this big area that we're gonna like put in front of you, and then you can walk away from it. But this one was like, the straight shot is to the main thing, and then if you go off into the woods, maybe you'll get a little curated thing about Bergir.
Vanaheim's already a relatively big, meaty map already with where you were, especially because a lot of the exploration happens like down south, when you do a bunch of Freya's backstory that you wouldn't have expected. All the way up north, and the place is completely cloudy, you have like this big map where you're gonna fight a bunch of dragons. If you remember the trailer, there's like this moment where there's like this massive dragon that Kratos like does the parry, and then he just like falls to the side. That dragon is there. In one of the trailers from like September, and that crater is just the aftermath of something Faye did. And then as you do these side quests and the favors as you're there, you're like figuring out backstory that builds up a lot on.
That'll probably fill the gaps of what I was really getting, but I do wish that like we could have gotten a little more of the Fae that Kratos met. Like almost just like a little bit of that little moment of when they first encountered each other or something. And I know like this was more, that wasn't the focus of it, but I do also wish we could have just had a little of that other version of Fae before we got this one that's just fed up with Kratos, you know?
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's so funny that you said that she was fed up, because I never felt of her like she was fed up. She was just she was counseling him to be better. Like that, the whole theme of being better.
Probably not the best choice of words, but the idea that she's like, she will not tolerate the way Kratos has been. Where she's like, she's not fed up and like, I'm getting out of here. It's like, I'm going to sit you down, look you in the eye, kind of intervention style, which is good. It is healthy. It is needed, especially for Kratos. But I also wish we could have gotten that other side of it, where it's like, hey, things are a little lighter now. I want to see like the woman that Kratos fell in love with, you know?
Here's the thing. There is a chance we could still get that, because even though this was the end of the Norse sagas they had seen, you can still continue the story, I tell you.
That's a good point. And we could theoretically get more flashbacks, because Kratos is clearly not done with all this stuff. And I mean, what do you think? Do you think that he's going to go into different areas like they teased in 2018? Because you remember in Tyr's Vault, they had...
He went to the different places.
Yeah. So do you think he's going to do something like that, or is he more going to stay in this area and it's going to just have more of the plot?
If you find that, what I did find interesting about that final painting that they showed of him being like praised, is that he is dressed more like his Greek self.
I did see that.
But he still has the axe.
Right.
Is he going to rebuild Greece and Norway?
Oh, if he returned to Greece and literally faced the stuff that he caused, that would be fantastic. Because as we've seen, there's a lot that you could have done. I mean, people back then was like, oh, he killed everyone. There's no way to kind of go back to it. I feel like there's ways you could go about it. Another thing that had me curious was that Thrud mentions that she wants to go off searching for something. I think it's Mjolnir, and therefore she's going to become the new god of thunder. So I could see like just there's more seeds planted of possibility in where he's at currently.
And here's also the thing, Paul. There's side quests that open after this game is done.
Right. So there's more that we haven't experienced quite
exactly,
yet. So yeah, I mean, there might even be more stuff to do with that. And I'm certainly not putting this game down anytime soon.
No,
but I am glad that I at least got through the main meat of it to at least have that catharsis for me as I'm about to disappear into the ether for like 5 days. Oh, but
I'm glad that you were able to, because I couldn't imagine you if you had stopped at a very crucial moment and then having to go on vacation. That would have killed me, because it just becomes a page turner that you just want to see to the end. And part of me is like glad that we finished it. Part of me is also sad because it's rare for us to get games this good. Yeah, like that, like legit that they lived up to. Even against my own apprehensions, because I had more apprehensions towards it than even you did at a certain point.
I remember you were like forcing yourself not to get excited for it because you were like, no, I can't. It's gonna like, what if it sucks? What if it's not as good? And I think this would certainly surpass the predecessor in pretty much every way.
Yeah. So this, let me put it like this. This wasn't a Dark Knight going to Dark Knight Rises for me. This was a Batman Begins going to Dark Knight for me. This is kind of how it feels, and I'm so happy it felt that way, because even though some of the issues that I have with this one were also problems that I had with the 2018 one, obviously I have more rose-tinted glasses with that one because of how much it meant to me, that I can't quite say that it's a perfect game, but my God, this game landed its story, it landed the big moments, it gave me so much fun gameplay that just kept giving us more and more and more and more without ever feeling bloated for me, that I'm just shocked. I'm like, I tell you, it's rare for me to get a game I like this much around this time of the year. It's been a while, because this is usually just Call of Duty time. Or those kind of games, or even maybe when Assassin's Creed was launching around this time. That was like, those were my fall games, and it's rare for me to get something like this around this time, and I'm just so pleased. And even though I'm right now as the Game Awards nominees for finally unveiled, this one has like 10 nominations above Elden Ring 7, which makes sense because I can imagine that God of War Ragnarok also has elements that are worthy of being also nominated on top of Elden Ring, that even though Elden Ring was nominated for like narrative, and I'm like, that's weird. I mean, you could technically find an interesting narrative you look for it.
I would say lore is different than narrative, though.
Exactly, and there's a lot of semantics happening over it.
Yeah.
I feel that Elden Ring could still take it because that game took the gaming industry by storm earlier this year. And I'm not going to be opposed to an Elden Ring win, because I kept saying, I said, until I got soured on it on the Elden Beast, that was like such a phenomenal experience that we got early.
Oh yeah, I'd say it was like best game for me in the last like 2 or 3 years, maybe even with maybe like an exception here or there, but like overall it was such a powerhouse of a game. So even though the story I feel was just kind of not there at all, which
because it's not the point.
So it's like that wasn't what it wanted to do, and it did great everywhere else, especially in like the world and the scope and everything. But then God of War Ragnarok is anything that Elden Ring isn't a dead ringer for is going to sweep. And I would say especially for something like the audio, for sure, the story for sure, maybe even the action adventure, because depending on what your preference is, those are two very different games. And you put a gun to my head, some of those spots I couldn't tell you which one is going to win out. And that's the best kind of case scenario, because now it's like, who is anybody's game out of these two?
To me, because I like when a game can give me the complete package, and this one just its narrative landed for me. I think this is my favorite game of the year, but I'm not going to be opposed to an Elden Ring win. These are the two, like, in a year where I feel like this is interesting, because we're definitely going to talk more about this whenever we do our overview of what 2022 was from the beginning and the end. What a back what a front and back loaded year that in technicality gave us really great games, but overall I wouldn't call it one of the best years in gaming. It's so weird how that happened.
It's weird because of the placement, I think, a lot of it, and I think also the disappointments of all the things that were supposed to that got canceled out of it. I think is really what is souring us. But if you looked at it without that, really we had a pretty good year, honestly. When you really break it down. I mean, we had a killer Resident Evil game. We had God of War Ragnarok. We got
Resident Evil didn't come out this year. It was a DLC.
Ah, damn it, you're right. Yeah. All right, whatever. This is the Final Fantasy remake all over again.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay, so God of War, Horizon, Elden Ring, and then everything else. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. We had a good amount of things that really killed it. I mean, if that's not even your thing, we had the new Tactics Ogre. We had all of the other stuff of different genres that people have been really excited for. So it's overall, I think 2022 is a pretty good year, and it's going to be interesting to look back on it in hindsight.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to think about, because obviously 2021 was just fine, but I enjoyed that it made me consider many games that would have just been good or great, and that helped kind of like fill up the year a little bit more. We didn't get as many of those like this, but in 2022 we got bigger bangers. But I feel a healthy year is one that can marry both, and I feel 2023 can be that. But as of right now, it's like I'm just glad that God of War Ragnarok ended up happening this year. I'm glad it didn't slip. I'm glad it ended up being as good. Yeah,
and I'm sure pretty soon there gotta be like, so it was like at a hair's breadth. We almost canceled it or something. Not canceled, pushback. So I'm glad we have it. And sometimes I'm in the middle of playing it and I was like, gosh, this is that game that we were like not sure was going to even happen this year. So I'm just glad for it. And at the end of all of this, it's like, I want to go play more.
Absolutely. And I can't wait to platinum it. And what a game of the year is going to be really interesting, but I'm just so happy. This game made me happy. I wish we can get more games like this. I tell you, I wish. If they didn't take so long to make also.
And just imagine if they tried to split this into 2 games like they were.
Right. I'm like, even though I can see the argument that some things could have maybe had a little bit moment of breathe. Like there are some characters that maybe got too little screen time, like that big guy with the sword that sacrifices himself in the big boat. Though you find him in the side quest that you do, that having to go find him.
They're like, nah, he's got to be alive. Go find him. He's probably just hurt. And like, I'm sure they could have fleshed out Asgard a lot more, because it really was one walkway and then the house.
Yes.
So it's like there could have been more there. You could have had more from Svartalheim. Technically, you could have had more from Muspelheim and Niflheim. Really, and it's like you could have just continued to flesh out and add more and stretch, but then in the end you're trying to tell a specific story.
And just think about it this way, like this fulfill what I had told you that I found out about like PS2's God of War 2. The original ending of that game, ending sequence, was going to be the Titan climb, and they couldn't get it in with the technology, so that was the beginning of a third game that then had to like recycle the same plot beats.
The entire third game was the Asgard siege. I could totally see that having happened, and I'm really glad that we did not retread that. And
it just makes this game just so much more satisfying having gone that way, because then it didn't have to make us arbitrarily wait. Now it's just a great Norse duology.
Yep.
So, and whatever next, because this God of War is selling so damn much. It
outdid Elden Ring and Call of Duty in the UK. I saw
in the UK, so first week sales. That's insane, especially for an exclusive.
Oh yes,
that's just on PS5 and PS4. It's
killed it. I hope it just continues to blast records and keep doing great.
And just keep showing Sony that this is the kind of game that they should keep investing, even as they keep trying to go into live service crap. So.
Just make these big, really well-made single-player games, and people will sit there happily.
Yeah, so that was the spoiler cast for God of War Ragnarok, Paul. I'm so glad that we were able to have this no whole bars conversation. I'm just
finally did it.
Yeah, and not having to try to walk on seashells, because it's clearly put as a spoiler cast. But because of when this episode is going to launch next week, we're actually going to read the list of games that are releasing. The week this is posting and the week after. So It did. So this is gonna be the dates of games coming from the week of November 20, and I'm gonna read all the way to like the anything that comes out until December 2nd. So Evil West, Paul. So it's in the. You can go to GameInformer.com/2022 and go to November if you want to keep, and go to November to list them. So Evil West comes to PS5, Xbox Series X and S, PS4, Xbox One, and PC on November 22. Gungrave Gore comes to everything but Switch on November 2022. Just Dance 2023 comes to everything on November 2022. Ship of Fools comes to PS5, Series X, Switch, and PC on November 2022. Last Days of Lazarus, wonder what that is, comes to PS5 on November 29. Sable, that game that used to be on Xbox Game Pass that I didn't like very much, but it had a really cool art style, comes to PS5 on November 29th. I hope it has better frame rate. Soccer Story comes to everything on November 29th. The Night Witch, I've been hearing some interesting things about that one, comes to everything on November 29th. Front Mission First remake, the remake for the first Front Mission game, coming to Switch on November 30. Gundam Evolution comes to PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X and S, PS4, and Xbox One on November 30. Warhammer 40,000 Darktide comes to PC on November 30. Inscription comes to Switch on December 1st. Marvel's Midnight Suns comes to PS5, Xbox Series X and S, and PC on December 2nd. Need for Speed Unbound comes to PS5, Xbox Series X and S, and PC on December 2nd. Resident Evil Village Winter Expansions comes to Switch on December 2nd. And Callisto Protocol comes to PS5, Xbox Series X and S, PS4, Xbox One, and PC on December 2nd. That's in those 2 weeks,
December 2nd
Paul.
is like the secret sleeper bloodbath for this year, it seems.
Oh, yeah.
3 big games releasing on that same day.
On that same day. And
gosh.
And from the list that I had read, Evil West was one that we had mentioned, especially now that we know that it's co-op. Want to keep an eye out. It's gonna be out by the time that you're out, that you come in.
Yeah.
From vacation, so.
My goodness, there's a few of these. I mean, like Gungrave was an old 2000s anime. That's that hack and slash game. Night Witch was that 2D. I think it was a platformer. And there's a lot to be loved out here. Darktide that was the big one that a lot of people were excited for. Midnight Suns, obviously, Need for Speed Unbound. This is a good holiday. Like, this is a Christmas list right here, just by itself. So yeah, I'm excited for it. And shoot, by freaking next week, we'll have plenty more to be buying and to be playing. And it's we just sat back from the emotional draining of God of War Ragnarok, and the world still spins out
Absolutely, here. Yeah. But I tell you, I went into like a weird depression after God of War 2018, where no game was like hitting the spot for a while. I wonder if the same's gonna happen here, because now I have to go back to Sonic Frontiers, and
I mean, hopefully it's just because it's a very different game you'll survive, but I could totally also see that you fall into that until something like Callisto Protocol pulls you back into the narrative.
I was enjoying Sonic Frontiers so much anyway that I don't mind. It's just something that is just, now that God of War really impressed me in its later parts, now going back to Sonic is definitely going to feel, because I try to like balance both the games a little bit early on, just to not leave Sonic behind, because Sonic was like great junk food. We talk about a lot about games being junk food a lot, but he just felt that way. So, right, Paul? That was this week's episode, or whenever. Well, yeah, this one's posting the week after we're recording it.
Yeah.
So, and can't wait for people to see our Assassin's Creed ranking that's gonna go live first. So, where can people find you?
As always, y'all can find me at Dork of Art on Twitter, Tumblr, and YouTube. Just search that, you should be able to find me. I post me breaking games and art, so if you like either of those 2 things, that's the place to be. And Alejandro, where can they find you?
They can find me at Twitter at A_Drosegovia. They can find me on Instagram at Alejandro Segovia 93. They can find whenever we stream. You can find our streams at twitch.tv/The Slayer Giant. You can find some of my written content at thecriticalcorner.com, and in the future now, possibly like maybe relatively soon, it's been official. I'm a writer for Season Gaming. So,
let's go.
So yeah, that got approved today. So I'll be writing reviews for them. So whenever when those reviews are live, I'm gonna definitely promote them. So can't wait, Paul. And it was fun. Everyone that listened to this, I hope you enjoyed God of War Ragnarok as much as we did. If you didn't, let us know if you felt otherwise, or if you loved it even more than us. Like, we would like to hear from you. And I hope you have an enjoyable rest of the day when everyone reads this. Thanksgiving is right around the corner. Time to eat some nice turkey. Stay healthy, stay safe, and remember,
Press X.
to play.
Good night, everybody.
Hasta la vista, baby.